Hello, everybody. My name is Travis Washington. I'm the creator of the Hands Up Act. But before I dive right into it, I want to give out many different forms of police brutality. One of the many different forms of police brutality is torture. See this man up here, John Burge, was a Chicago police officer for more than 25 years. He also, my father's cousin, he also tased my father's cousin's testicles and forced him to admit to a crime he did not commit. In Dalton, Alabama, there was a police force, a neo-Nazi, neo-Confederate police force that planted 1,000 drugs on 1,000 people. These officers never got charged for the crimes that they committed. They planted drugs, they planted guns on these individuals, and these individuals are still in prison to this day. This has been happening since 1994 to 2015. And last but not least, the physical violence that happens to people. This is a quadriplegic amputee boy who has no legs, no arms, and he was slammed by a police officer because he had a temper tantrum. These are the many different forms of police violence, but the ones I want to focus on today are unarmed shootings. Boston University School of Health and University of Pennsylvania reported that when African Americans witness unarmed shootings of other black people, it causes mental health problems, stress, and depression. That was reported by USA Today. Another form of police violence and how it affects the mental health of many. LA Times reported that 1,900 shootings that occurred throughout the history of the United States have caused low birth rates and early births in black women because of the chronic stress of unarmed shootings. Now, these children who grow up seeing and being born early are struggling in school, struggle making friends, and act out, all because of police shootings. These are some of the names that have been affected by unarmed shootings. In 2015, it was Philando Castile. 2016, it was Terrence Crutcher. 2017, it was Jordan Edwards. 2018 was Stephon Clark. 2019 was Anita Jefferson. Who's next? Is it going to be you or you? It can be anybody in this room. Because if I don't feel like your life has any meaning, I'll do whatever I want to you. We all don't want to lose somebody, especially not to law enforcement. That's a horrific way of viewing our society. There's things that really frustrate me when I see it, is that not only when these officers shoot somebody unarmed, they get hired back into the police force. Tamir Rice was shot within 2 seconds, and he had a toy gun. And guess what happened to that police officer? He was hired back by a different police force. Terrence Crutcher, who had his hands on a window. The helicopter was looking, all of us were looking, the situation seemed stable, but she shot Terrence Crutcher unarmed, and not only that, she was hired back to the police force, and she has to take trauma classes, and she shot somebody unarmed. Last but not least, Stephon Clark. There was a huge bill that passed in California called AB 392 that's supposed to slow down police shootings, right? After they passed this historic bill, it was on the ACLU, it was covered by everybody. They hired these 2 police officers back on the force. It was like a smoke screen. We look here, and then they do something behind our backs. It's incredibly disappointing. One of the things that frustrates me the most is that Philip Bradford was the officer who shot Daniel Shaver unarmed. And not only did he shoot somebody unarmed, he was hired back by a different police force. He received a $31,000 yearly pension. Daniel Shaver, I'm about to pull this photo up now, was in a hotel room with his hands up begging for his life, and the officer shot him. And it was reported by Real News Network that Philip Bradford is 28 years old. By the time he turned 64, he would have made $1 million off the taxpayers' dollars. And he shot somebody unarmed. He didn't go to jail. He was hired back to the force. This is incredibly disappointing. There have been some reforms. I'll give President Obama credit. He did the best he could with the tools he had. He used an executive order called 21st Century Policing. It supports police body cameras, increases funding for training, and law enforcement agencies should adopt enforcements to stop, curb discrimination, curb all types of harassment. But this is the problem. According to the Washington Post, in 2017, 15 of the 69 unarmed shootings were recorded by a body camera. Police departments increasing de-escalation training, and individuals in the police department were recorded saying racial slurs. This is my biggest problem. What's the punishment? If I videotape with my body camera me shooting someone in the arm and I'm not punished for it, what's the problem? I'm just going to do it again. If you train me for 3 months, 6 months, a whole year, as soon as I get off the force, I'm going to do whatever I want. Antoine Rose, one of the mothers, Antoine Rose was shot 3 times in his back by a police officer on his first day on the job, fresh out of training. And the biggest problem with this is, what was the punishment? He was never sent to jail. There's been police departments recorded on walkie-talkies saying racial slurs. What's the punishment? The United Nations is, for most of you that don't know, is 193 countries that come together that forms its own organization that determines human rights violations and makes legislation that somewhat impacts the world. Police killings and the trauma they create are reminiscent of the past racial terrors of lynching. Pretty much, unarmed shootings are a new form of lynching in America. And just like lynchings back in the day with the Klan, they said, it's my duty to protect everybody. The Klan was a law enforcement agency. There's quotes that I live by. Lincoln did not free the slaves. The enslaved freed themselves. There were 250 recorded slave revolts in the United States of America. The Hands Up Act is number 251. The police accountability activists are the civil rights activists of our time. After all, who watches the watchers? These are the 2 quotes that I live by. 1, the slave revolts. 2, by Jason Bassler, the owner of Policing the Police 3.0, told me to stick with that. So I came up with this idea called the Hands Up Act. It's a law that I created where if a police officer shoots somebody unarmed, it's a mandatory 15-year prison sentence. I had this idea for around 2 years. I thought I wanted to be a congressman and senator before I passed it, but Professor told me, Father Brown, why wait? I don't need that validation anymore. I needed this law. I don't care about that position. I want the law. I have had a lot of support, and I had a lot of people that were not so supportive. But at the end of the day, making sure this is law is the only thing that matters. There's a lot of contradictions that I get. I have people telling me, what if they come off as dangerous? What if they have a cell phone? I can't tell what a weapon is. Cliven Bundy had machine guns and snipers held at federal police officers. Not a single shot was fired. Robert Louis Deere Jr., also known as the Planned Parenthood shooter, shot 5 people, killing 3 and also shooting a police officer. Last but not least, Fred Hopkins shot 8 police officers, and 1 of them died. You know what all 3 of them have in common? They all came home alive. Why can't unarmed people come home alive? But there's hope with my legislation. Southern Illinois University wrote a story about my Hands Up Act, and over 1 million people have viewed it. The College Democrats of America invited me out to give a speech in New Orleans, and I got to demonstrate what I know and all the things that I accomplished. I got to introduce it to congressmen and attorney generals. And last but not least, one of the things that I'm very proud of is that more than 400,000 people have signed my petition. The Hands Up Act has made it to the New York Times. A U.S. Senator from a Judiciary Committee called me to discuss the Hands Up Act, and it says 5 different states' governors called me, but it's actually number 6. I received another call from a governor just 2 days ago. So it's making progress. One of the most defining moments for me is that I met the mother of Michael Brown and the mother of Tamir Rice. They are huge supporters of my Hands Up Act, and they told me to keep on pushing. I'm not going to surrender. I'm not going to give up, because all my supporters who signed the petition and we bow down to nobody. We're going to stand up, rise up, and fight for our rights. My next goal is to reach 1 million signatures, get a hearing in front of the United Nations Human Rights Council, because I want the whole world to see what is happening in America. Shakespeare once said, shame is more powerful than fear. And I want to bring shame to America. I want the whole world to be ashamed of what it's doing to its own citizens. One of the biggest things that I've been proud of is that it's at 420,000 signatures. And I asked everybody in this room to sign and share. And one of my final goals is to speak in front of the House of Representatives so the world and America can know who I am, the creator of the Hands Up Act. My name is Travis Washington. Thank you for my TED Talk.